If I had low self-esteem, the first thing I would do is stop chasing approval because low self-esteem does not always show itself in obvious ways. Sometimes we walk into a room and instantly wonder if they like us, if we look awkward, and if it would be safer to just stay quiet. But why do we keep waiting for permission before we allow ourselves to be real? Most people think low self-esteem means you just need more confidence. And I understand why, but that is only the surface. Confidence looks like the answer from the outside. If you were more confident, you would speak more, act stronger, care less, and stop overthinking, right? But that is not where I would start, because confidence is not the root problem. Approval is. Low self-esteem begins when you let other people decide how much of yourself you are allowed to show. So let's dive in and talk about the 5 things that keep low self-esteem alive. Point 1. Why do we chase approval? The first thing is approval, and chasing approval does not always look desperate. Most of the time, it blends into normal life. A fake laugh slips out even when nothing is funny. Words get swallowed because speaking feels too risky. An opinion changes the moment the room feels different. Little by little, we become easier to accept, smaller to judge, and harder to truly see. That is how low self-esteem controls us. It makes the room more important than our own truth. So before confidence even matters, the real question is, why do we need people to like us before we allow ourselves to be real? Because if someone's reaction decides how much of ourselves we show, then they own a part of us. Which brings us to something even more uncomfortable, and that is point 2. Why do we feel unwanted before anyone even rejects us? Low self-esteem can make rejection start before anyone else gets the chance. A normal room suddenly feels like evidence against us. Before anything even happens, the mind starts whispering things like, "They probably don't want me here. I look awkward. Talking too much will make it worse. I don't fit." Nobody has to say it out loud. Once that story feels true, the body follows. Shoulders tighten. The voice gets smaller. Eye contact turns into scanning. Even taking up space starts to feel wrong. Then people feel that wall around us, and in our head it turns into "See, I knew something was wrong with me." But rejection did not begin with them. It began with the story we believed before the room even had a chance to respond. So the real question is, are we actually being rejected, or are we moving through the room like rejection already happened? And after living like that long enough, hiding starts to feel safer than being seen. It starts feeling like who we are. Point 3. Are we boring, or are we hiding? A lot of people with low self-esteem call themselves boring. But boring is not always true. Sometimes we are just hiding too much. Thoughts, opinions, humor, energy, depth, it is all there. But showing it feels risky, so we filter our personality and speak less or choose safer answers. Hold back the parts that feel too easy to judge. After a while, feeling invisible starts to hurt, even though hiding was supposed to protect us. But people cannot connect with parts of us we never show. Being calm, thinking before we speak, or preferring deeper conversations does not mean that we are boring. It becomes a problem when fear decides how much of us gets shown. So, are we actually boring, or are we protecting ourselves from judgment? Because sometimes being quiet is not a personality, it is a coping mechanism. Point 4. Are we quiet by choice or quiet by fear? Being quiet is not the issue. Some of us are calm by nature and need our own space. Loud rooms and shallow conversations just do not feel right, and that is completely normal. None of that means something is wrong with us. The problem starts when silence is no longer a choice, but a cage. Peaceful silence feels like control. Fearful silence feels like survival. One means we are choosing not to speak. The other means we are scared of what might happen if we do. That difference matters, because the goal is not to become louder. The goal is to become free. Free to stay silent when it feels right, speak when something matters, and stop shrinking just because our mind expects judgment. If silence is only protecting us from judgment, then where does real approval actually come from? Point 5. The approval we want from others is our own. The approval we keep chasing from others is usually the approval we never learn to give ourselves. That is why compliments can feel good for a second, but never fully land. People can tell us we are enough, interesting, and valuable, but if our own mind keeps arguing against it, their words do not stay. They pass through. So, the real work is not making everyone like us. It is learning how to stop abandoning ourselves the moment we feel exposed. Feeling awkward or afraid does not mean we have to turn against ourselves. A mistake does not have to become proof that something is wrong with us. Instead, that can be the moment we stop attacking ourselves and choose to stay real. Because low self-esteem starts losing power when our own approval becomes stronger than their reaction. So, if I had low self-esteem, I would not start by trying to look confident. I would start by stopping the approval chase. Then, I would pay attention to the moments where rejection begins inside my own mind, before anyone else even says a word, because most of it happens automatically. We walk into a room, feel judged, start holding back, and think it is just our personality. But the moment we become aware of that pattern, we can stop believing every fear that shows up. We stop calling ourselves boring when we are actually hiding, and we learn the difference between staying quiet because we want to and staying quiet because fear is trying to protect us. And finally, we stop waiting for other people to give us the approval we never learned to give ourselves. The goal is not to become perfect. The goal is to stop leaving ourselves every time we feel judged. Because when we stop asking the world for permission to be ourselves, that is when self-esteem finally starts becoming real. I really hope this video helped, and if something in this hit deep, subscribe. Because over here, we are not just watching videos, we are building stronger minds.